So Andy Fox is up next. So
We're good.
do you need a pause?
We're good.
We're good? All right, and Andy's another of our brilliant Cardinal employees who's working on Wizards of the Coast. He's going to be talking about some of his experiences as well.
So I opted out of the slides. I'm kind of like a low-tech kind of guy, believe it or not. My talk's about testing and production. These are words that scare people, some people. They shouldn't, and kind of here's why. So there are essentially three categories of software today. There's applications, there's software plus services, and there's services. So a typical app might be Word. People buy a shrink-wrap product, install it. Software plus services might be Google Docs, where most of the time you're connected to the internet, but when you're working out offline, you still have to have a little bit of an app there to do something. And then, of course, there are services like Google, Facebook, Amazon, eBay, anything like that. As the development models have changed, everybody's familiar with things like waterfall, iterative, agile. Testing is always in there, but testing is changing. It's a little different in each of those things. So what testing means varies depending on what you're testing. So it still makes sense to test traditional applications in traditional ways. That stuff hasn't gone out the window. My current project, one of the things that we have is a client, and the client is not a lightweight client. So it makes sense to have traditional testing methodologies in place to make sure that that's the highest possible quality. On the other hand, there are other places where you have services where you have to do something different. And the different thing, it's not new, none of this is really new, is testing and production. So what I'm saying is that if you're doing a service, it should be tested in production. Now, you might work for a company that is moving from traditional applications out into service. In that case, you should think about shifting the way that you're testing. I worked at Microsoft for quite a while, and our team, the Autopilot team was, Autopilot is a platform as a service, essentially, and that's what Bing sits on top of. So what we had was an SLA that people, that we promised our customers, the people who were running Bing, essentially. We had to test things differently there. So what actually happened while I was there, we had SDETs, we had SDEs, and we had PMs. We had the typical, try whatever team. And that changed while I was there. They said, you know what, we don't really have SDET jobs anymore. We have this idea of a software engineer. And that role went away. It's since gone on. That happened, you guys probably heard of Satya Nadella. He was the Online Services Division VP at the time when that happened. Now he's the CEO. That's basically happening company-wide. So one idea is, if you're in a place where this is happening, you might think about maybe you should be an SDE who writes tasks, which is what I did the last couple of years there. Not quite exclusively, but almost. So common knowledge, everybody knows that if we catch bugs earlier than later, it's cheaper, it's easier, right? We can back off. And this is true with services as well. So, but a key point is you don't want to keep testing and testing and testing and make something really shiny and perfect, because while you were doing that, your competitor has delivered something that's good enough. And now they have market share. And then 6 months later, you're still playing catch up. And they are just iteratively improving their service, but they got there first. So basically they win. This is why it's important to be testing differently for services. So how do you catch problems with services? You have to know what the service looks like when things are going well. So you need some kind of monitoring. You have to say, oh, we have metrics. We actually have an idea that we're going to see such and such a percentage of people hitting our website at these times of day. You can use historical data. You can make assumptions in the beginning and tune it. But you need to know what things look like when they're going well. And then know when you want to trigger an alert or some kind of action that unwinds something. And let me be a little more concrete. Let's say that you have a certain number of people that are visiting the website, and you just see that that's tracking. You're servicing all those requests, and all of a sudden you realize that the amount of traffic just went way down. Well, why is that? Is it because everybody suddenly decided that they're not going to search the internet anymore? Probably not. It's probably something on your side. And hopefully you're not just looking at that one metric to make the decision that there's something wrong with your service. You've got these watchdogs operating at different levels. And you can use a combination of them to figure out what's going wrong and then figure out how to fix it. Key point, watchdogs are tests. So, testing production. You can't just say, oh, I'm shipping a web service, so I'm going to test in production. It's not that straightforward. So there are things that everybody should be doing already, but that you can't operate services without doing. One is you have to have good source code control. Another one is you have to have the release process that you talked about earlier. You have to have all that stuff nailed. You need to have continuous builds as people are making changes. You need to have gated check-ins where, hey, I think this works, and you submit it to some service of your own. It comes back and says, hey, that didn't build. Okay, now I'm not actually able to check it in until I pass that test. Now it's in. Okay, test will run against that. Now it's good. Now it actually deploys. So some places will deploy. Well, when I started, we were doing about every 6 months, and then we knocked it down to about every 2 months, and then when I left, it was once a week were official releases, and there were daily rollouts, and if there was some kind of hot fix, it just went out whenever it was ready. Monitoring, already talked about, and then the ability to roll back. So let's say that you have a working version of some service, and that's cool. And then you say, hey, I'm going to ship some new version of this service. And you check it in, it starts going out, the deployment happens. Suddenly things break. Well, you have good monitoring in place, so you detected that it broke. Now what? Now you have to be able to roll back. You have to be able to roll back to the previous version quickly. You've just got to be able to do that. Now, let's say that there are problems rolling something back or any generic problem. You need to be able to have all hands on deck. And this is critical. Basically, this means DevOps or engineering ops. You have to have people that have access and the ability to get at the machines that they need to get in. So you can't really have the silo. A lot of places, they'll say, oh, we've got our development team over here, and then we have this fence. And we throw something over the fence when it's darn good and ready, and then the ops team is responsible for it. Now something's broken. Now you've got these teams that have to communicate. You can't really do that when you're operating services. You have to have, well, I think you have to have DevOps or engineering ops, where somebody says, hey, this is wrong. You can pay somebody, or maybe they're already at the office. This is the downside of DevOps. But it gets fixed by the person who screwed it up usually, which is a good thing. An example, Watchdog, this is a trivial example, but it's one of the first ones that people typically write, is if you've got a web page, well, can you hit the web page? Do I get the 200 okay, yes or no? So that might be a simple watchdog. And you go, oh, wait, you said something about rolling out earlier. So when I do a rollout, that thing isn't available. And my watchdog is going to say, hey, that's not available. I need to roll back. No. The watchdog has to be smart enough to know that it's okay to go for 45 seconds without, a passing test. And you should be developing watchdogs at the same time or preferably before, like watchdog-driven development. I don't think anybody's coined that yet. So testing and production. There are several different major categories of it. A lot of people are probably familiar with all of them. A/B testing, where you say, okay, part comes in, he's going to get served this version of the service. Joe comes in, he gets served that version of the service. And you're collecting data and finding out statistically which one is working better for you. You might try on new user interfaces for your Amazon does this, right? And you say, okay, people like that one more, and then you make it happen there everywhere. Another one is you could have a version that you know you want to deploy. You're not A/Bing it. So you just do it incrementally. You say small audience, bigger audience, bigger audience. I know it's obvious. Another one is shadowing, where from the user perspective, they do something, they see a result. What they don't see is that that's being duplicated and being processed by some other shadow system that they don't get to see. But you're collecting data and you're saying, oh, wow, the new system, once we release it, we make it visible, is actually much better, we hope, than the one that's invisible. My favorite one is induced failures, where you say, hey, I'm going to break stuff on purpose. And that's one of the things that I got to do, which was actually a lot of fun. There's a Netflix is famous for its Chaos Monkey. I wrote something, I think similar to it. I actually didn't look at Chaos Monkey, but IMP is a service that I wrote, and what it did was it triggered repairs. So we had an automated repair service already that when it detected that, hey, things were broken, it basically had a laundry list and said, I'll ignore it, see if it goes away. Oh, that didn't work. Maybe I'll restart the services. That didn't work. I'll go through and I'll restart the machine, et cetera, all the way up to RMAing the thing. So what my service did was it said, hey, that machine needs to be reimaged. Hey, that machine needs to go to RMA. Hey, that machine just needs to be left alone. And it would randomly, without violating the service level agreement we had with our customers, it would randomly introduce failures. And people who had services that were running on machines when this thing hit sometimes were very, very unhappy. I've got several stories to tell anybody who wants to talk afterwards. I already mentioned that Autopilot is a platform as a service. I mentioned IMP. Key point with IMP, at the time we had 3 levels of environments. We had test environments, we had pre-production environments, we had production environments. And this IMP ran on all of them. And the idea was, if you're going to run something in production, you're probably going to want to test it out in your own test environment first. And errors can happen there too. So we were introducing errors intentionally there as well. There was a way to get a waiver temporarily. And after that, we said no more waivers. And a good point there was my boss had my back, and when we had people that got very, very unhappy when their database, their only copy of the database in the whole world, got blown away on purpose, and they wanted it back. He's like, sorry, we're meeting our service level agreement, have a nice day. So that's it. Just testing and production is here. It's not really new, and don't be afraid of it. Just embrace it. It's good.